Everybody. I'm Mark Sachs, a director with ELNET US and a frequent moderator for ELNET's international briefings. And I'd like to welcome all of you for joining us for today's conversation. As usual, we have a terrific speaker who will offer analysis and insights about Turkey's President Recep Tayyip Erdogan's quest for a neo-Ottoman empire and its impact on Israel. And before I introduce our guests, I want to make sure all of you understands what ELNET does. ELNET is a 501c3 tax-deductible organization whose mission is to broaden and deepen diplomatic, defense and security, and economic cooperation between Europe and Israel. Through our 6 European regional offices, ELNET works in more than 30 European countries with the EU and NATO. And our Israel office coordinates and leads more than 30 delegations for European lawmakers, policy influencers, and high-ranking military personnel. These delegations, as many of you know, are life-changing for those who participate. And the influence these delegates possess can be seen in parliaments, policies, and perceptions all across the continent. We simply cannot do what we do without your support. You are the backbone of this organization. And for that, I want to say thank you to everyone on this call. Board of directors, Diplomacy Club members, and any of you who give us any support at all, thank you. If you are in a position to renew your support for 2026, since we are early in the year, please do so. I promise you, we will continue to steward your investments efficiently, wisely, and constructively. Thank you. Now to our guest. Hay Eytan Cohen Yanarocak is a Turkish-Israeli scholar of modern Turkey. Hay is a researcher at the Jerusalem Institute for Strategic Studies and at the Moshe Dayan Center for Middle Eastern and African Research at Tel Aviv University. He is also a lecturer in the Department of Middle Eastern and Islamic Studies at Ben Gurion University of the Negev and at Ariel University. Hay, welcome again to ELNET's Monday Briefing.
Thank you very much for having me. I think it was almost 2 years that I was not here, right?
Not quite that long. You were here last February. It might feel like 2 years because
wow.
the world has changed in a year.
Yeah, definitely.
Thank you for the segue. That leads to my first question. A lot has happened since you were here last February. The entire geopolitical landscape has changed in the last year, and it seems like the two countries that have arisen to the top are Turkey and Israel, but for very different reasons. Last year, I had to go back to the videotape to watch. Last year, you called the Turkish-Israeli relationship complicated. And I imagine it's no less complicated today. And I imagine I will also say this, I think the relationship between Turkey and Europe is complicated. So if we could, I'd like to look at this from 3 different perspectives. Mm-hmm. Let's start with the first one. If you are Benjamin Netanyahu, or, commentary aside, you're now the prime minister of Israel. You bypassed all the elections. You're also the foreign minister and defense minister.
Okay.
You look at Erdogan, you look at Turkey, you look at the region. What are you thinking today? What are you seeing today that is different from what you thought and saw a year ago, from Israel's perspective?
Okay. So again, first of all, thank you very much for having me on this distinguished platform. And I think no Israeli prime minister was empowered with such jurisdictional powers. But let's imagine that I would be empowered with all of these jurisdictional powers. Yes. I would look at Turkey as a very important rival, as an important opponent, but still I would do everything possible in order not to tag Turkey as an enemy state, even if, as a prime minister, I would be very much aware of the Turkish hostile actions against the state of Israel. First of all, I would like to underline and highlight that Turkey and Israel have never declared any hostilities against each other. So from an Israeli perspective, it would be very important for the state of Israel not to declare any hostilities and not to include Turkey to the list of Israel enemies. We do not need any more enemies. But of course, Israel is not a naive country. The Israeli government and the decision makers are not naive people. They are very much aware of the challenges that Turkey is nowadays constituting and coping against the state of Israel. Well, when we are looking at this chessboard, we can definitely say that Turkey is almost everywhere in the Middle East. For instance, in the aftermath of the fall of Bashar al-Assad, we can definitely say that Turkey filled the vacuum, which which formed with Iran's and Russia's departure. We definitely see that on daily basis, we are seeing the Turkish penetration in Syria is becoming more and more concrete. And definitely, the Turks are turning Syria into a kind of a satellite state. And from a Turkish point of view, what Turkey is doing in Syria is not something that is, let me say, disconnected from the Turkish history. I would like to remind you that the Turks ruled Syria for 402 years, and therefore they do not see their presence in Syria as a dangerous adventure. But rather than that, they see it as a historical justice that they are coming back to the lands of their grandfathers. Of course, I'm quoting. So today we see a Turkish military presence in northern Syria. The Turkish defense minister openly says that they have no intention to withdraw from Syria. During the last operations that were conducted by the Syrian regime against the Kurdish PYD, we definitely saw that Turkey was on the side of the Syrian government, and in an implicit way, they also supported the offense against the PYD organization. In Turkey's eyes, this organization is considered as a terrorist organization and as an offshoot of the PKK. So it is not surprising at all, but this is something very gentle. At the end, there is also an ongoing peace process in Turkey with the Kurdish movement. So Turkey wanted to maximize its own interests in Syria while not collapsing the current peace process within Turkey. This is also very important. And from time to time, we are seeing that Turkey is doing its best in order to go to the southern Syrian areas, for instance, the central Syria, and of course to southern Syria. Recently, we saw in the Turkish press that the Turkish administration placed there a new radar system at the Damascus International Airport. Last year, April, we have read in the press that the Turkish armed forces had an intention to station in central Syria in the locations, in the exact locations where Iranians were once upon a time stationed, like T4, Hama, and and if I'm T4 Hama and one more. Unfortunately, I forgot the name of the third location, but we are talking about the central Syrian area. Basically, because of the Israeli Air Force's airstrikes that were conducted on, especially on these locations, Turks could not penetrate and station in these locations. But we can definitely say that in the aftermath of these airstrikes, the Turkish Foreign Ministry declared Israel as Turkey's number one national security threat. And obviously, this definition became even more obvious after the Israeli, Cypriot, and Greek trilateral alliance summit in Jerusalem.
Right.
The
I'm
day,
going to pause you there because I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves.
okay.
I want to keep this somewhat regional because I want to try to let's sort of
So,
talk big
so
picture
it,
first.
okay. So let me then, if you allow me, we
Yeah.
are seeing Turkey in Syria. We are seeing Turkey in Eastern Mediterranean, which means with Turkey's
Mhm.
very strong fleet, we are seeing the Turkish presence also in this west side of Israel. We are seeing Turkey in the day after in this war in the Gaza Strip. I'm sure that you're all aware that President Donald Trump is collaborating with President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, considering Turkey's role in the Gaza Strip. Turkey would like to play an important role with boots on the ground in Gaza, but the Israeli government is not allowing for Turkey to have this bridgehead in the Gaza Strip. It would be a grave mistake for the Israeli government to pave Turkey's way, actively. Boots on the ground, it would be a strategic mistake for the state of Israel when we are looking at Turkish armed forces presence abroad. We never see that this army is withdrawing from a location that they are dispatched. We are seeing their presence in northern Cyprus, northern Iraq, northern Syria, and western Libya, in
Mhm.
Somalia, in Qatar. So
Right.
I also mentioned you this whole locations, these whole geography, and this latest war, it's also taught us something very important in Israel, that Israel's national security is not starting from the city of Eilat, but rather it is starting from the Bab el Mandeb Straits. And therefore, the Israeli recognition of Somaliland, and as far as I understand, this recognition was not made for nothing. I want to believe that we are going to use Somaliland first and foremost against the Houthis and to deter Houthis, but also to give a message to the whole region that Israel's long arm is capable of reaching, not only surroundings of the city of Eilat, but all the way to Bab el Mandeb. And this is very important because at the end, we are seeing that during the last decade, we are seeing, especially in Somalia, we are seeing the Turkish penetration also there. President Erdogan is speaking about to forming there a space station. So let me decode it for you. What is a space station? It's a ballistic missile base, basically. Why they are intending to uh, form this military base in Somalia and not in Turkey? Because once you are launching this long-range ballistic missiles, so if you're launching them from Turkey, you most probably will hit your neighbor. But when you're doing it in Somalia, you're going to launch it towards the Indian Ocean, and nobody would be disturbed from it. So, for Turkey's long range ballistic missile program, Somalia is a great location. And needless to say, Turkey is also conducting their hydrocarbon and oil seismic researches, and they are deploying their fleet and army. Lately, their F-16s and Navy were seen in Somalia. So yes, I'm once again highlighting Turkey is not an enemy state for the state of Israel, but is definitely challenging Israeli national security. So therefore, it should be contained. And the Turkish side should understand that Israel is not looking for a confrontation, but if we are playing a chess on this chessboard, which is called the Middle East. So Israel, as a sovereign state, is also making its wise decisions in order to protect its own interests.
Okay, let's. There's a lot to unpack there, so I'm gonna step back a moment, and
Mhm.
I want to get a sense of the relationship between Europe and Turkey. Turkey's in NATO. Turkey hasn't always played well within NATO. It aligns with Russia. Um, it, help us understand Europe's perspective towards Turkey. Clearly, President Trump has embraced Erdogan, embraced Turkey, much to the chagrin of many people in the pro-Israel communities and within Israel itself, and add Qatar to that list. So, how is Europe addressing and how does Rudd at NATO and van der Leyen at the EU Commission look at Erdogan in Turkey?
Okay. So, first of all, traditionally, the EU is looking at Turkey in a critical manner. We all know that. And since Turkey is seeking full membership from the European Union, I assume that you are all aware that Turkey is still in an endless accession process for the European Union, historically speaking. I think, from my perspective, Turks are seeing Europe as a Christian club, and the Europeans are obviously seeing Turkey as a Muslim country. And from my perspective, this is the most important reason that Turkey is not in being integrated into European Union for years, even if it was once upon a time much more democratic and free. Today, the situation is very complicated. There is a very visible decline in the Turkish democracy. How do we measure it? We can see that the most important opposition leader or candidate, potential candidate against Erdogan, Mayor of Istanbul, Ekrem İmamoğlu, is still held in prison. From my perspective, again, in my opinion, it's a kind of a political assassination. First, they declared that his BA diploma is not valid, and it was a very arbitrary decision. This was very crucial because, according to the Turkish constitution, in order to get elected as a president, it's a primary condition that you should have a university diploma. Then they said that he has turned into a leader of a crime gang. And if it's not sufficient for you, later he was also tagged as a spy for the United Kingdom. And only a day before the arrival of the British Prime Minister to Turkey, uh, İmamoğlu was tagged and was labeled and declared or accused, let me say, as a UK spy. So why is it important? Because the UK Prime Minister did not cancel his flight. And instead, he also sold to Turkey 20 brand new Eurofighters. So, what is the most important drive of the Europeans? I know UK is not a part of European Union anymore, but I'm looking at the I'm looking to the continental Europe plus Britain as a whole. Okay, uh, Britain and Europe, especially, of course, Germany. The German Chancellor also followed the British Prime Minister, and he conducted a visit right after the UK Prime Minister, Chancellor Merz. Of course, he was also in Ankara, and we did not see a very important disagreements between the two, even if we are seeing the constant deterioration of democracy in Turkey. And the core reason for that is, of course, Russia. Europeans are very much disturbed by the war in Ukraine, and they do not want to add an additional, let me say, headache in their eastern flank. And therefore they want to please Turkey as much as they can. So Turkey will not change its axis and would collaborate more with Russia. And this is very important. And the Turks, as far as I see, they are also very much aware of the situation, and they are exploiting it for their own purposes.
Mhm.
And the Europeans are solely focusing on the Russian problem, and obviously because of the disagreements between Europe and Donald Trump is also affecting the whole situation. Donald Trump's approach to Turkey is also showing the Europeans that they have less leverage on Turkey. Also, I should also underline this. And besides that, when I'm looking at the European Turkish relations, of course, I see Greece and Cyprus as a very important element here. These two states are turned to Israel's most important allies in the region. And from my perspective, the architect of this alliance is no one else but the Turkish President Erdogan himself, because Erdogan, with his own hands, pushed Israel towards, I mean, to the arms of the Hellenic states. I would like to remind you that until the Madrid peace treaty, even Israel did not enjoy a recognition from Greece. However, Turkey recognized the state of Israel since 1949. This is, saying us something that the two countries, Israel and Turkey, enjoyed a kind of a honeymoon during the 1990s. There were very important cooperation between the two militaries, and which we did not see such a thing with the Greeks, for instance. However, because of Turkey's unilateral decisions against the state of Israel, and if I have to summarize it, Turkey is conducting a very unprecedented delegitimization campaign against Israel. They are legitimizing the Hamas terrorist organization in every occasion. This is crucial. Turkey has become a part of the South Africa's bid against the state of Israel in ICJ. Turkey is imposing economic sanctions against the state of Israel, and there are naval sanctions against Israel. So the list is from here going, you know, and it's very long, unfortunately. And we are definitely seeing more and more instability in the relationship between Israel and Turkey. And, in a very natural manner, this vacuum is filled by Cyprus and Greece. And, I would like to make a metaphor here. Let's say that I'm in a kindergarten. If you don't want to play with me, I would obviously look for Sari Steinberg and I would play with her, for instance. Okay? Because you don't want to play with me. So it's very obvious that Israel took this decision from a realpolitik, point of view. However, when we are looking at Turkey's foreign policy, we can definitely say that the Turkish foreign policy is driven by ideological reasons. And when we are talking about the current Turkish foreign policy, we can say that it's a kind of a marriage between pan-Islamism and neo-Ottomanism. So what is neo-Ottomanism? Neo-Ottomanism is the desire of the current Turkish administration to revive the historical Turkish influence in the ex-territories of the Ottoman Empire. Where are these territories? Of course, the Balkans, Northern Africa, Middle East, Caucasia, Black Sea region, and of course, since we are talking about a growing Turkish nationalism, we can definitely also should speak about Central Asia because of pan-Turkishness, which reached to a new climax after Azerbaijan's recapture of Nagorno-Karabakh and the strengthening of the organization of the Turkic states. So I can sum up that the Turkish foreign policy is based on three pillars, or we can definitely say that it's like a clover. Like we have ones in the Balkans, in the east with the Central Asian states, including Caucasia, and of course the Middle East and Africa. So Turkey has great ambitions, and Europe in this regard is still trying to form a proper common foreign policy, and it is also very much challenging for the Europeans themselves because there is no political unity that they can take the necessary decisions. Also, still, the nation states are also in some aspect, to some extent, they are also very much influential, and this is also weakening the European countries, especially vis-à-vis Russia, and also vis-à-vis Turkey.
You've taken us on a tour around the region a couple of times, so I want to hit on them because I find that it's very interesting how you combine the pan-Islamism with the neo-Ottomanism. So if we look on the map, and you use the metaphor of a chessboard, Syria, Pakistan, that Turkey is working, which is far outside Turkish Empire,
Mhm.
Somalia, Turkey and Erdogan are forming relationships with both governments in Libya, which creates a real problem for the East Med pipeline, which I hope we'll get to because you brought in Greece and Cyprus, and that creates tensions with Greece, Cyprus, and with Israel on that. Um, and it is Somalia's number one foreign ally. But when I look at this map, it strikes me as being very 20th century, not very 21st century. None of these countries represent an innovative, dynamic future. Whereas the UAE aligning with some of the Sunni states aligning with Israel, a quest for Saudi Arabia's 2030, Vision 2030. I mean, that was a very innovative, dynamic aspiration. Whether it'll come to fruition or not, no one knows. It doesn't appear that way. So help all of us understand really what is Erdogan's long game here. What is really driving it? Is it really just pan-Islamism? And if it's neo-Ottomanism, an empire that doesn't seem very economically strong and innovative seems destined to go nowhere. So
Okay.
what is his long game?
Okay. So I'll start from the last sentences regarding economy. Well, I'm sure that you are more or less aware of the very brotherly relations between Qatar and Turkey, and I assume that you are very much also aware of the role that Qatar is playing when it comes to money. So these two states are like one plus one. Turkey and Qatar, they are completing each other. While Qatar has this economic power and the drive, Turkey has the tradition of the state and all of the how should I say the instruments to carry out all of these ambitious plans.
The
So
military might,
yes,
right?
definitely
The military might, yeah.
military, soft power, and also public relations. Okay, together with the Qataris as well. Okay, so uh, in Israel, many people are speaking about Turkey. If Turkey is like a new Iran, when you're comparing Turkey with Iran, first of all, obviously, for now, as of February 2026, Turkey is not Iran. Okay. But when you're comparing these two states, we can definitely say that Turkey enjoys a very, legitimacy. I mean, its economy is very much integrated with Europe, Germany, UK, and others are considered as Turkey's one of the most important trade partners. So Turkey is not like Iran. So first of all, we should highlight this. Okay, it's an open country, and it's also creating some a kind of an interdependency, which is a great thing. And regarding the other issues that you mentioned, for instance, during the last 6 months, we are seeing a U-turn when it comes to Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is distancing itself from the UAE. I mean, from an Israeli perspective, we would wish to see the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia together with the United Arab Emirates. But what we are seeing is these two countries are falling, I mean, they are getting apart, right? And instead, we are seeing that Turkey is mending its fences with Saudi Arabia. And according to Bloomberg, Saudi Arabia, Pakistan, and Turkey, they are also engaging in negotiations to launch an Islamic alliance. So you mentioned, for instance, about the innovations, etc. And well, when I'm looking at this trilateral alliance solely, I see, for instance, the most important role is given, for instance, to Pakistan. It's a nuclear power, right? So it's a very clear message why Pakistan is included in this venture. And Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, it's a symbolic act because of Mecca and Medina, and obviously the status of the Saudi state in the eyes of Islam. And of course, they have, you know, very strong economy. It's a rentier state, which is mostly relied on oil. It's a rich state. And as I already mentioned, Turkey is not an artificial state. It proved its state's institutions. It has a strong army. Its geopolitical location is super important, and more importantly, also their defense industry is getting more and more developed. And during the last skirmish between Pakistan and India, we have seen that the Pakistanis used the Turkish UAVs, okay, against the Indians. So this obviously is pushing India into the arms of the United Arab Emirates Israel axis. Okay, so this is also another very important issue. And when we are looking at India, because of Turkey's pro-Pakistani stance, for instance, Turkey's BRICS membership is not going anywhere because of India, because India is blocking Turkey's upgrading the relationship with the BRICS. And regarding Turkey's endgame, well, as I already mentioned, Turkey is seeking to form here a kind of an Islamic NATO. Okay, so if let's once again look at the strategy of Iranians and let's compare it with the Turkish approach. The Iranians chose to form rings of fire, you know, around Israel with terrorist organizations, which are considered as illegitimate. And it is very easy to get the support of the West, of the European Union, of the United States to cope with this threat. Of course, this threat is, you know, very important. It's a hard challenge, but to get the political support to struggle against these rings of fire, you do not really have to persuade for hours the European decision makers or the US decision makers. It's obvious that the Houthis, the Hezbollah, and Hamas are all terrorist organizations, and all of the civilized states in the West are also considering and seeing these organizations as terrorist organizations. So where is the catch here?
Wait, Hai, can I pause
Turkey,
you there for what would be the
Turkey,
different? let me
Yes.
just ask a quick question. What would be the difference between this Islamic NATO and
Yes.
the
So
OIC,
let
the
me let
Organization of Islamic Cooperation? What is the difference?
so the difference is Turkey is forging alliances with legitimate nation states. Okay, and these are not considered as terrorist organizations. Turkey says that, now we would like to have a friendship and defense cooperation agreement with the new Syrian government. Who would criticize Turkey for improving its relations with its neighbors? Turkey is not fighting with its neighbor. Instead, it is providing humanitarian aid, it is hosting its refugees and trying to resend these refugees back to Syria, and they are providing aid in order to improve the state mechanisms and the Syrian army, for instance. So, who can challenge this other than Israel, and who can see this policy as a problematic approach? No one else other than Israel. The Europeans would say, "What's wrong with that?" It's Syria, the new Syrian government. They brought a tie and a jacket to this Al Julani and turned him into Ahmed Ashara, to a brand new statesman, as we would forget that he was an Al Qaeda slash Jabhat al Nusra terrorist yesterday, right? Maybe the Western capitals, especially the Europeans, and also the United States, they are interested in forgetting his past in order to, proceed and to improve the interests of their own countries. I can understand that, realpolitik dictates them to take such decisions. But unfortunately, since we are not seeing a mutual recognition between Israel and Syria, we cannot be as optimistic as the Europeans and the Americans. We are seeing this as a very important challenge for Israel's security, especially after October the 7th. And therefore, what we are seeing is Turkey, since last year's March, is seeking to form a new organization called the Neighbors of Syria. What is Neighbors of Syria? Who are the neighbors of Syria? Of course, Syria, Turkey, Iraq, Lebanon, and Jordan. So when you're looking at the map, northern Israel, northeast Israel, and eastern borders of Israel are surrounded with these nation states. And obviously, Turkey is also seeking to make a rapprochement with Egyptians, so that this ring, or what I'm calling it, the Turkish crescent, would be closed entirely on Israel's borders. And I already mentioned you the strength of the Turkish Navy. So this crescent would be, encircling the state of Israel also from the sea, and therefore uh, Israeli, Greek, and Cypriot alliance is becoming more and more crucial here, because definitely Israel is breaking this ring thanks to Cypriots and the Greeks, and also showing to the Turks that if you are playing here again, also Jerusalem is capable of playing this game just like the Turks are playing this game. Because if we are seeing the Turkish strategy is they are making some new friends, especially they are trying to have this Middle Eastern Union, as the Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan says. Recently, if I'm not mistaken, like 2 weeks ago, he said that if the Europeans are capable of launching this European Union, why shouldn't we do this and implement the same vision in the Middle East? He said, I'm not talking about the Turkish domination. I'm not talking about Arab domination or the Persian domination, but we should, as the people of the Middle East, obviously he is speaking about only the Muslims of the Middle East, that they should unite together to deter whom? Okay, to deter whom? To deter the state of Israel, and for not allowing the United States to conduct extraterritorial military operations. If the United States is going to tell uh, if United States is going to tell to Turkey and to other regional countries that there is a problem of ISIS, for instance, these states are telling to the United States, please do not intervene militarily. Please tell us what is your problem, and we are going to solve this problem in a regional manner without having you here as an external actor. So the most important objective of Turkey's strategy is to distance the United States, especially from the Middle East. They really do not like to see the American military buildup in the Middle East. In the first days of the October the 7th, when President Biden sent the American Navy to the Eastern Mediterranean to deliver a clear message to Israel's enemies when he said, don't, you had to also see the Turkish press. They were asking really silly questions. Are the Americans are sending their navy to deliver a message to Turkey in a question mark? Are they doing this military buildup to deter us? Question mark. I mean, come on. It's obvious that there is something very big happening, and you are not the only center of the world, and Israel was challenged. Its sovereignty was violated from 7 different directions. And therefore, while all of Israel's enemies were collaborating together, it was obvious that also Israel's allies would collaborate with Israel to improve Israel's position in this war, which was not declared by Israel. This is very crucial that we should once again have to highlight and have to remind that Israel was attacked, its citizens were butchered, and they were kidnapped, and Israel had no option other than declaring a full-scale war against these terrorists who did not value the human life and human dignity. So this is more or less Turkey's strategy. Alliances, legitimate alliances. I'm highlighting this word, legitimacy. Turkey is giving so much importance to legitimacy.
I want to expand. The Turkish crescent is going to lead me to my last question. Then I'm going to open it up to others. And I think it's important because I want to talk about IMEC, the India, Middle East, Europe Economic Corridor, which is a key initiative for ELNET. And if we think about Turkey's expanding enclosure of Israel, we're seeing what is the potential for IMEC to be hijacked by Turkey, because Saudi Arabia is a key player here. So instead of it running from India to Dubai or UAE, I'm sorry, up through Saudi Arabia to Jordan, Israel, now it could go through Saudi Arabia, which will be more than happy to join alliances with Turkey, perhaps for economic gain, up to Jordan through Syria and out to the Mediterranean. That would be on the eastern flank. And as you discussed, Turkey's alliance in the Mediterranean with Libya closes a potential lane for energy on Israel's western flank. So could you talk about how relevant
Sure.
this is to Israel's security?
Well, that's a great question. First of all, when we are talking about IMEC, we should also see how Turkey sees this. Okay, Turkey has a very well-known foreign policy when it comes to resources. Turkey would like to function as a hub, as a bridge that would function between East and the West. And therefore, they are doing their best, for instance, to attract the attention of the Belt and Road Initiative with the Chinese, for instance. And they really do not like this idea that Turkey would be bypassed. Uh, who is bypassing Turkey? Well, almost everyone which is taking place in this initiative. India, first and foremost. I already highlighted why the Indians do not want to cooperate with Turkey because of Turkey's very close relationship with Pakistan. And it became super obvious during the last skirmish. Secondly, yes, we are seeing a kind of a rapprochement between the Saudis and the Turks, but I also would like to remind you that these relationships, this relationship is something very fragile because of the Khashoggi, Jamal Khashoggi affair. I assume that you may remember. The Saudi journalist
Mhm.
Jamal Khashoggi was killed in a Saudi consulate in Turkey. And thanks to its surveillance cameras, security cameras, Turkey could prove that the Saudi state was, organizing everything. So the Turks, with their findings, inflicted a very important damage for Mohammed bin Salman's legitimacy. Then, I think Mohammed bin Salman is not forgetting it, and therefore, I really don't think that he is trusting Turkey, but rather he is also playing here this chess game in order to maximize his own interests vis-a-vis the United Arab Emirates, for instance, and also to vis-a-vis Israel as well. And this is something very crucial. So when I'm looking at the map, so the Turks are seeing that the Saudis, the Indians, and obviously Israelis and the Greeks are not welcoming Turkey in this venture. Therefore, what Turkey does, Turkey is coming with its own corridor. Uh, Maybe you are familiar with it, maybe you are not. In Iraq, there is a port called Fav. This is located in the vicinity of the city of Basra, and there they are nowadays are constructing a port which would function as the starting point of their own corridor. All of the goods that will be dispatched from the east will pass from the Straits of Hormuz. I'm sure that we are all familiar where the Straits of Hormuz today because of the current brinkmanship between the United States and Iran. And then these these goods would reach to the Fav port, and from there with railroad and of course with highways, they would be transported from southern Iraq to central Iraq, then to northern Iraq, and then to Turkey, and of course then from Turkey to Europe. So if you would like to have this kind of, how should I say, a prosperity line, let me say, what you need there, peace. And therefore Turkey is seeking to mend its fences with its own Kurds. Okay, because when once you are going to mend your fences with the Kurds, then you will have a peaceful passage from northern Iraq, and also southeast Turkey is mostly populated by the Kurdish population. And of course, then it will come to Europe, and Turkey may profit from this venture once again. And obviously, this project will bypass the UAE, Saudi, Jordanian, Israeli, Greek option. So this is the Turkey's response to IMEC. We can definitely sum up with this answer. And as you can see, Israel and Turkey are mapping each other always on the opposite edges of the same game. If Israel's on the right side, Turkey is on the left side, always at the opposite sides. This is very unfortunate for the Israeli-Turkish relations, but this is the case right now. So we'll see who will prevail. But let me say, uh, what you mentioned regarding Libya is also very important because let's when we are talking about the East Med project, the natural gas pipeline that would be sent from Israel to Cyprus and from Cyprus to Crete, and from Crete to proper Greece, and from proper Greece to Italy. This is a very this is a very ambitious project, and um, let me say from my point of view, many experts are questioning its feasibility because of the depth of the Mediterranean Sea in some areas. But besides the depth, let's imagine everything was possible. Turkey's maritime delimitation agreement with Libya's government of national accord of 2019 is creating a huge headache for this venture. Okay, so the most important test for the implementation of this project would be the laying of the electric cables from Israel to Cyprus and from Cyprus to Greece. If you are, if you will be able to lay these electric cables, which will create a precedent, an example, right? Then you would also be able to lay your pipeline if the depth will allow you to do so, right? But most likely, again, as we are seeing in the agency, Turkey, with its blue homeland doctrine, is seeking not to recognize um, Greek territorial water claims. By the way, when I'm telling you Greek territorial claims, we should highlight the fact that the Greek thesis is based on United Nations Convention Law of the Seas of 1982. And it's in a nutshell, I would like to summarize. It is defending the idea that every island has its own continental shelf and territorial waters. Okay? But from the Turkish perspective, if these islands would declare, for instance, 12 miles of territorial waters, and if let's imagine that they have their own continental shelf, the Turks are saying that they would be imprisoned in the agency because of the proximity of the Greek islands to the Turkish mainland. So this is creating a very critical problem also for the Turkish eyes. And I must admit that it's something logical. Maybe the two countries should sit together and should decide different regimes for different regions in the agency because this is something not sustainable also for the Greeks and also for the Turks, especially the case of Castellorizo. I don't know if you are familiar with the island, but there's a very tiny island in the Eastern Mediterranean, just before the Turkish shores. Uh, if the UNCLOS would be implemented as is, thanks to this tiny island, Greece would acquire great, you know, naval areas, maritime areas in the Eastern Mediterranean at the expense of Turkey. So the Turks are seeking to draw a median line from between the Turkish mainland and the Greek mainland, but it's also creating a problem because drawing a median line between the two mainlands would turn the Greek islands into Greek enclaves in the Turkish waters. So this is also something not sustainable. So
Yeah,
long
from what
story
I've
short,
We're running a little bit short on time, so I want to try to get to a few of our questions,
Apologies,
but
apologies.
that's
Sorry.
okay. Great. I mean, terrific information there, really. Thank you. I do want to say I think I've read that both Greece and Cyprus have tried to lure Turkey into negotiations to deconflict, but Turkey has decided to go in a direction towards Libya in its own path. So, bottom
Yeah,
line, I think we're going to continue to see tensions arise on Israel's west and
yeah,
east as
yeah.
the Turkish crescent starts to enclose even further. So let me get to some questions. Before I do, I want to make a very quick announcement for everybody. ELNET is going to lead a diplomacy club mission to Poland, April 26th to May 1st. If you have any interest on this call and you are a diplomacy club member, please contact Carol Mostow. Randy will put Carol's email in the chat so everybody has it if you don't already. And with that, I want to go to one of our questions, and I want to apologize in advance. We are running low, so I'm not going to be able to get to everybody's questions. This one is from John Mirish. He really wants to know, what responsibility does Israel have to protect the minorities in the region, the Yazidis, the Kurds, the Druze? Um, what's your thoughts? What are your thoughts on that?
Okay. First of all, October the 7th made tectonic changes in Israel's national security look. Before the war, Israel was very cautious, and even it hesitated to remove a tent that was placed by the Hezbollah terrorists in the Lebanese-Israeli border, just not to ignite a new war between Israel and Lebanon. However, as I already mentioned, October the 7th, and it's made tectonic changes, so it shaped a new Israel security doctrine. So, as I already mentioned, Israel's security is not starting on its borders, but rather beyond its borders, because unfortunately our state is tiny and we do not have a strategic depth that most of the countries have, like Russia, Turkey, and other countries. And therefore, nowadays we are seeing that Israel uh, had no choice but to capture five very important strategically locations inside Lebanon, strategically important locations to have a security zone in Lebanese-Israeli border. And also, Israel moved forward and occupied the Syrian Hermon. Okay, and obviously, when Israel entered into Syria, it also began to engage with the Druze community. The Druze community is very different than the others because in Israel we have Druze citizens, and these people are contributing to our state as full-fledged citizens. They are paying their taxes, they are fighting for the state, they are getting recruited, they are obedient, good citizens. And therefore, uh, when we are looking at the Jews who are living in Syria, because of this bond with Israeli Druze people, we are seeing the Israeli government is seeing the Jews over on the other side of the Syrian border as brotherly uh, ethnic group, a nation, okay, that should be protected, because if they would not be protected, our national harmony would be very much affected from this. First of all, it would be a debt for our Jews brothers and sisters who are living in Israel with us. And besides that, as we can also see, these Jews people who are living on the other side of the borders, they are not against the state of Israel. They are um, potential allies of the state of Israel. And this is very much applicable with Ben Gurion's periphery doctrine, which is based on the fact that Israel should make alliances with non-Arab ethnicities, states, and groups in the entire region. So, therefore, Jews' status is very special and they should be taken as an exception. Now, I would like to refer to the Kurds. The Kurds unlike the Druze people, their location is very far from Israel. The location of the Druze is almost adjacent to the Israeli Syrian border, right? But the Kurdish people's location in Syria, they are very far away in northeast Syria. So we also see that recently, approximately a month and a half ago, Israel and Syria they made a new summit in Paris, and even if we do not declare such a thing, but more or less we understood that the Israeli government is acknowledging northern Syria as a Turkish um, influence zone. And on the other hand, we are seeing southern Syria as a kind of Israeli influence zone. And therefore, Israel has its own limitations of power. Yes, Israel sees the Kurdish people as potential allies and as allies, but unfortunately, Israel is not a superpower and is not willing to provide this kind of aid and to confront other nations just to provide an aid for the Kurdish people. So this is very complicated. Yes, there is a bond, but Israel never declared such an intention that if the Kurds would be attacked, then Israel would intervene. Israel never said such a thing. However, on contrary, when it came to the Druze, Israel always drew a red line and warned the Syrian government. And when the Syrian government passed that red line, Israel bombed Damascus. We all remember that. Regarding the Alawites, well, the Alawites were in power for a couple of decades, and Bashar al-Assad was an Alawite. We did not see that it's played in Israel's hands, and they're also far away in western Syria. So if Israel is not doing anything for the Kurds, you should not even think about that it would do something for the Alawites.
Dr. Hay Eytan Cohen Yanarocak, thank you very much. This was
Thank you very much.
extraordinary. I hope
I'm very
everybody
curious. I'm very curious what will be our next discussion, next year.
mark at your calendar, February 2027, right here at the
Okay,
ELNET
I'm
briefing.
in. I'm
We'll
in.
see
Thank
you
you very
then.
much once again for this distinguished platform.
Pleasure to have you. Thank you, everybody. Sorry it went a little bit longer, but I hope all of you found the extra time worth your time. Thank you.
Thank
See you
you.
next time.
Bye bye.